I'm going to go ahead and record it this time. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Meet a Deaf Person workshop. Our guest of honor for today is named Daniel Koo. Daniel is currently the director and a professor at Gallaudet University. He specializes in psychology and linguistics. He has his PhD as well. So today he's going to talk about the importance of language as it relates to memory. So there are different forms of language. There's sign language or spoken language or cued speech. And he's going to expand on some of those today. Now, if you have questions during his presentation, please go ahead and type those in the chat box and we'll answer those at the end. Now, for your best viewing experience, if you see several black boxes on your screen right now, you can go over to your video settings. You can see it on the bottom left, and where it says stop video, there's a small arrow, a little caret at the top that you can click on that and it will show video settings. Once you click on that, there is a place that says hide non-video participants. And when you click on that one, then all of these black boxes will go away and you can see a lot better. Okay, so we will go ahead and start. Thank you so much, Daniel, for being here today to present for us. Now I'm going to turn my video off as well. He's going to share his screen at this point, at this time. Just a second. Perfect. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today. I'm going to give a little bit of background about who I am, and I'll also explain some of the research and language background connected with memory, language and memory, and offer that to you about how to communicate with deaf children, how that affects them and around the world. So let me start with this. So you may notice that I'll be talking about cued speech and also language and so forth later on, but we'll cover these different items and I'll probably cut some of that off in the PowerPoint about halfway through. I do have more to that, but I'll save that as a PDF and it will be sent out to you later through Briella. Okay? Now, a little bit of background information. I was born deaf in Washington, D.C. My parents were hearing, and I grew up orally in the 70s. I won't give you my exact age, but in the 70s, I grew up doing oral speech. My parents realized that that was not successful for me. It didn't work for me, and I kept missing things and was delayed in school and so forth. And so my school district had a cued speech program, and my parents decided to place me in that particular program to see if I could understand. And so then I began to develop more. I did really well. And in junior high school, I learned sign language. They had a deaf program there, and there were a lot of deaf individuals, deaf students, and so I learned sign language from them. And so I grew up using both cued speech and sign language. Of course, at that time, it was more of a pigeoned signed English, PSE. But anyway, I continued on until I graduated from high school. Then I went into the University of Maryland for my bachelor's degree, and then for my master's degree in linguistics, in ASL linguistics, there at Gallaudet University, and graduated, and wanted my PhD then in cognitive science, which I obtained. And then I became a faculty member of Gallaudet in the psychology department, teaching undergraduate courses. Interpreter, are you okay? Yes, I am. All right. So now I want to give you a little bit of background information, basic concepts. I don't want you all to miss anything. I want to try to keep you on target about the concepts of language. Are language and speech the same? I ask you. No, they're not. Now I'll explain why here in just a minute. Language and sign, are they the same? No. So language itself is very abstract. We use speech to show this abstract language. So my point is, an abstract language being abstract is that it's in your head, it's in your brain. We have that here. So when you take that out and try to present it by communicating to other people, then that's when you need a type of a form. Hearing people will speak. For deaf people, we have that language area in our brain, and then we sign to model that communication. And when we communicate and children watch us and they learn, then they have the same understanding, the same vision as we do, as the parent does, that model that we have presented to them. And that's through form. So sign and speech are forms. They're not language. They're just forms of modeling the language. Okay? So we have two forms of communication within language. Traditionally, over thousands of years, we've used a primary form, which means taking turns back and forth as we chat and talking. There was no written form at that time. And so our first language was through the primary form. When babies are born, a month old, they're not able to read. They're not born knowing how. And so, the first or second year, they use that primary form, and that's how they learn language. So for deaf individuals, it's for sign, they use signs, and for hearing people, they talk. When they're about 3, 4, and 5 years old, then they are exposed to reading if the language has a written form. Not all languages have a written form. Some languages do not have a written, they only speak, such as Native American languages. They only have, like such as Navajo and so forth, they don't have a written form, they only have spoken. Okay? So there's a primary and a secondary. So remember those two things. I'll use that again throughout this presentation. Now, that natural language development, you may be wondering what that looks like. When you're born, you may be listening or watching as you develop your language. By the time you're 6 years old, you have 15,000 words, or you can sign that many by the age of 6. Language is not something that's automatically there. You learn that from your family, parents, and interaction. It's a very natural way. From a deaf family, it's also very natural to acquire the language, the sign language. The red box here means when you start reading, this is when this happens. Children learn and apply things that they already know, and they see that in print, and they make the connection between the print and the word that they learned prior to that. Oh, C makes it sound like a K, and blah, 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 and so forth. Okay? Now, the bilingual child, let's say, that uses speech. Let me show you what that sounds like. A spoken language. So for hearing, that makes sense. They'll hear and speak Spanish, or they'll hear and they'll speak English. And then they learn how to apply that to the written forms. But if it's a deaf child, it would look like this. So a deaf child who is bilingual will learn ASL through sign language, through signed. That's their primary form. And they'll learn English through their primary form. You might be wondering how they would do that. So there's a variety of ways. They might hear it and not so much, but for speech, there's a variety of ways. ASL doesn't really have a written form either. So you might see that on video. That might be considered as a written form in these days. And then we have English. So if you have a deaf person who signs ASL as their first language, then you have to figure out how they can map that in their head. They have ASL, and how do they map that to a written English? So you see the arrow here. And so that's not a traditional way of learning language. Spanish and English both had parallels in how you learn the language, but in this case, it's a little bit different. And so some people are able to connect the two, and they know how to go from a signed language to a written form of English, but not everyone does. So now this is what I would offer to you. More than 90% of deaf children come from hearing families. So maybe you're wondering, what does their language look like? So this is why I put question marks for the ASL. Is it dependent upon hearing families and their situation, the home situation? If a hearing family already knows ASL, then great. If not, then how do you map the one language to the other? How can you offer that as a primary form of language? They don't have the speech, they don't have the access, maybe not. It's time to switch interpreters.
So that's the challenge that we're faced with. What do we do? Many times parents that have deaf children identify, okay, well, now we have a language issue. How do we bring our language to our deaf child? That's what I'm about to explain. Before we start getting into that, I'd like to talk a little bit about language memory. Language is a transient thing. That means that it's spoken, but, oh, I'm sorry. Something came up on the screen. Okay, so as I was saying, language is a transient thing. It's spoken, it's signed, in some way information is given, but it could be missed. And so it's got to be monitored in some way. It's got to be able to be seen or taken in, otherwise it's missed. And that's why it's considered transient. So with the memory, when information is received, it's retained until you get to the end of the message. And so through that memory, you're able to take in the information, you're able to process the language. So for language development, memory is very important. That's something that's developed on a daily basis. Vocabulary is retained and stored into a memory bank. So you'll have your ASL memory bank and your English memory bank. And it's very interesting how dependent we are on that. If you grow up without a language, your memory is severely impacted. It's very difficult to describe what you see. So it's important to understand that memory is reliant on language and language on memory. They interrelate with one another. So now I want to do a fun exercise with all of you. I'm hoping that you'll be able to see my slide here. I'm going to give you one word. And just to be fair to our deaf and hearing audience alike, it will be provided in one form, printed English. So I want you to see the shape of the word. I want you to see the print of the word and understand how it could easily be missed. The context of that word could be missed based on how it's presented. So I want you to let me know what you see when I bring up the word. You can type it in the chat box if you like, and I'll let you know if you get it right or not, okay? What did you see? Any guesses? No idea, totally missed it. Okay, anyone else? Another, totally missed it. Can you give it to me again, please? It was way too fast. Any other comments? No? No one caught it? That was a word? Yes, it was. Yes, it was actually a word. I'll show you the word you missed. Methamphetamine. Poor interpreter's got to try and pronounce the word. Why did you say something earlier? Somebody just made a comment. Okay, that's fine. So the benefit that you have is you have a language background, you have a knowledge base so that you're able to grab hold of a piece of that information. You want to try another word? Oh, okay. We'll try another one, but this is a new word, okay? Pay attention. Anyone? No? Missed it? Didn't get it? Missed? Oh, Welsh? Okay. Okay, very good. That's quite all right. I understand. Good job, everybody. This is your word. I'm not going to make the interpreter try to pronounce it. This word here is the German word for Christmas. I'm sure you could appreciate how much more difficult that is because I don't know how many of you speak German. But you could only imagine what a child would feel like if they saw a word that they've never seen before. How is it possible for them to memorize that information? If they don't have a language background strong enough to support that, a strong enough foundation, they're not going to be able to understand. Like the first word, methamphetamine, you're able to break that word apart based on the language structure that you're familiar with and the phonological information that's stored within that word. So like the word meth, fet, mean. So you're able to break that word apart into pieces, where the German word, if you don't have a language background to support German, you're not going to be able to read that word as easily. So that's the same principle as our little ones who are 3, 4, 5 years old. They're being exposed to English words that they don't have a language foundation to support understanding and acquiring that information. Does that sound clear? Everybody get that? All right. So understanding the oral method, which would be lip reading, and understanding the complexities of that for little children. When you're only seeing 30% of that information on the lips, is it possible that you can catch all the information that you need? That means you're missing 70% of what's being said. Oftentimes, context can help to fill in those gaps, but that takes a lot of practice. And it takes language development to be able to support those strategies, where that's going to be a struggle if you don't have language. The same thing with music, whether you're a good singer or not. It's the same concept as being able to read lips. Some people could sing, some people can't. And natural language acquisition allows full access to language. It helps to fill in those gaps. But if you don't have a natural access to language, you're going to have greater struggles. What are the challenges with signed English? Some of the challenges are here, making connections to English print and how to represent that information. For example, the top word there, how can we represent the word and the concept, the semantic concept by what's being said? For example, blinker. Are you talking about a blinker in a vehicle? Or are you talking about a person who blinks their eyes a lot? You wouldn't sign it like that if you're talking about a vehicle. You would sign it this way. You would indicate that it's a light on the vehicle. What about the word house? Is it a verb? Is it a noun? Are we housing information, or are we storing something? Are we talking about a house? It all depends on the concept, and that's hard to indicate just by the word. What about the word interest? Showing an interest in something versus a monetary interest. It's very important to know what the context is of the word to use the appropriate meaning when it's being expressed. Phonological information. That's not demonstrated here either. You have the word B-O-W. It sounds differently depending on how you use it. You have bow, bow, or bow tie. You have different ways of utilizing B-O-W. Another word is R-E-A-D. You could say read, read. It depends on how the word is being used as to how you would pronounce it. And that information is not reflected using signed English, or when it's in the written form, it's not applied there. Now, what about nonsense or jibber jabber words? Words that don't make sense. How are they expressed? Those words are just created, such as Jabberwocky as an example. You would have to fingerspell those words just to indicate the difference between each of them. Another thing to consider is how parents learn C-sign or signed English, and understanding the trouble with that because information is missed. For example, like S, ED, ING, these parts of the words are very important. Is he going? Where is the ING? To be sick. She wants, there's no S at the end of wants in this sentence, to play outside. As you can see, when I'm signing, there's a lot of challenge here to demonstrate where those endings would be put. There are specific rules to the grammar of English. So there's some complexity there with using a signed English form. Cute speech, what is that? That's something that we will explain. I'll explain to you right now. Cute speech came in about the 1960s. It was something that was developed at that time from Cornett. It's a specific system that was used to demonstrate how lip-read information could be more clear. And as we mentioned earlier, only 30% of that information is visible on the lips. So how do we improve the amount of access that a person would have? There was assigned 8 shapes or hand movements that would show the consonants, and 4 around the mouth that would show the vowel sounds. And all of those were part of the phonological awareness of a word to clarify how a word is pronounced or what the word is. So for example, if I were to say the word met, or I'm sorry, meet, or beat, or Pete, maybe a person named Pete, you see it on my mouth, it all looks exactly the same. What about meet? If I were to come up to another person, or it's something you eat. The only way to show the difference between each of these words is to have that hand shape by the mouth. That shows which vowel, and it also helps us to know if it's a short sound or a long sound, like pit. Depending on where the hand is moved, it'll show whether it's a long sound or a short sound. So if it's up at the mouth, it's a long sound, and down below, it's a short sound. And then that clarifies what word we're exactly saying. So now I'm going to show this part to you about a code. What exactly we mean by that. You think about the illustration of wearing glasses to lip reading. It's almost the same concept. If you don't have your glasses on and you need them, it's hard for you to see. Well, just the same as if you don't have the cued speech, it's hard for you to catch what exactly is being said. It's hard to clarify which word it is. And this is a code or a system that's used to clarify that. And this has been beneficial in adapting to translating in over 50 different languages, Spanish, Chinese, other languages that are based on a phonological foundation. This code has been used in that case. It's time to switch interpreters.
So you might be wondering, why use cued speech? Even though deaf people themselves don't use speech when they're talking or when deaf people are watching with their eyes and they see that with cued speech, they don't hear anything. So where's the speech element of that? And so sometimes that word speech is confusing because it's not really included. But Fleetwood and Metzger called it, maybe thought it should be called cued language. So remember, language is what we know. That's what's in our brain. And speech is a form of communication that accesses that language. Sign language is also a form that accesses that to be able to communicate that language in the brain. So let me show you the next slide. Language is here in the head, in your brain, and you take it out through some specific form, speech, signs, or cued speech. When we talk about all signed languages, ASL, BSL, the British Sign Language, French Sign Language, Italian, et cetera, all the forms of sign language, we're calling those signed languages. When we talk about spoken language, English, French, Spanish, etc. And so these are in a category of spoken languages. But then we have cued speech, and it's also from spoken languages, with the understanding how it's transmitted is through cued speech rather than through speaking and speech. So we have three ways to offer or convey language. And it's dependent upon what you know on which you will use. Right now, I'm using sign language to convey information to you through ASL, and the interpreter will use spoken speech language and translate it to English. Okay? So these are called primary forms. This is how we transmit back and forth between spoken or written communication and learning language through this primary form. Later, we'll use the secondary form, which is the writing, or Braille. That would be a second form. Or maybe through pictures, pictographs, hieroglyphics, what have you. So maybe you're asking, why use cued English? That's the same thing as saying spoken English, cued English. Many deaf children are from hearing families. How can the hearing families communicate clearly to them and convey that information to their child? But it's also important, why use ASL, you may ask. It's equally important to understand that. ASL is the natural language for the deaf community. Many deaf people use American Sign Language. When an individual learns ASL as their first language, then they will reach many of their milestones, same as with hearing children within their language development. So it's very important to have good ASL modeled by the parent. If you use two languages, ASL and English both, then we have a greater cognitive flexibility within the brain for the child and give them more opportunities to work later on if they're bilingual. I have more slides that are related to different scenarios. I'll save those for later, and I'll open up this time now for questioning or whatever you want to talk about. Okay, thank you. Can you turn off your shared screen? Perfect, perfect. All right, thank you so much. That's a lot of information. I learned a lot of new things today. I'm wondering, and as well as many of the others are, they may have questions. You can type those questions into the chat box, or you can open up your video and sign for yourself, or you can speak and the sign language interpreter will sign for you, however you feel comfortable. So go ahead and do that now. Hello. You have a question for Daniel?
Sure. I am the mother to a deaf 5-year-old. We did.
Oh, wait a minute. Hold on just a second. Sharon, hold on just a second. Lorelei?
Yes, Laura.
Right now, and then we'll get to your question, Sharon. Go ahead, Lorelei.
I'm a mother to a deaf 5-year-old. He has a mild hearing loss, and we did start ASL from infancy. We went to the Learning Center of the Deaf, which is a deaf school in Massachusetts, for the first 3 years of his life. and he chose to be verbal. he chose English as his primary language, even though we spoke Spanish and signed at home. But now that he's 5, he seems to be showing more interest in learning ASL. And I'm wondering what's the best way to go about doing that. We're in Cleveland, Tennessee now. I don't think we're near a deaf school that is ASL based. So I'm just wondering what resources or how I can help him learn it properly, since my ASL is limited and rusty.
Thank you, Daniel. Okay. In my PowerPoint slides, there are different bilingual scenarios that you can provide to children to give them bilingual access. Of course, it's dependent upon where you live and your own proficiency in language. So in your situation, you yourself could become a language model. I'm assuming it's Spanish or English or whatever, and model that and how you communicate that. So that's one way, is through cute speech. Another way would be orally, is spoken. I know they might struggle through that, or maybe through the use of hearing aids as an assistive listening device. But you can also use the school as a second language resource. So if the school there has an ASL mentor, like the Tennessee School for the Deaf, where they model ASL, then you could send your child there. And then once he comes home, he could use his native language at home. So that way the child will get benefit from both languages and from both environments, from home and in school, whatever's used at home and then whatever's used at school. So you could do that. Or if it happens that both parents are good language models, and one could model one language and the other parent model the other language, you could do that. So there's many different ways that you can present both of these languages to the child and become proficient. As long as they have full access to that and they're not struggling, they need to have full access, whether they hear or whether they see, whichever, if they're listening or seeing. So there's a website, there's more information in the slides that Briella will send out to you through in PDF form that will help with that as well. Briella says, yes, I will send the PDF copy of this PowerPoint to all of those who came to the presentation today. Also, if you want additional information about how to find ASL resources in your area, then just contact me directly and I will help you out. Okay? Great, thank you. Thank you. We have another question from Connie. Lorelai, you can go ahead and stop sharing your screen. Thank you. I mean your video. So Connie had asked, Dr. Koo, in your opinion, why is cued speech not more widespread or popular today? I think the very word cued speech in and of itself is a misnomer. And that leads to a lot of misunderstandings about what cued speech was intended for. The purpose of cued speech was to have clear communication with deaf and hearing individuals. So currently, we're just trying to present that language, nothing to do with speech, but just to convey that to the child. But cued speech, they think, oh, well, they'll start talking or whatever, and they'll be equivalent to hearing people, and that's not true. So that you know how to access English through the primary form. Once you receive that through the eyes, and then you have a bigger understanding, and it's mapped in your brain. So when you take that, when you want to communicate, you can use cued speech to convey that to another person, or you can speak it, or you can write it. But people expect cued speech. Oh, that means that deaf person can speak now. Wow. Oh, okay, let's try good cued speech, and it doesn't work, and there's a breakdown. And so, you know, it's by measuring success with that. It's not through the spoken language, but it's access to the language itself that is vital. So many people misunderstand that word itself. Thank you, Daniel, for that clarification. That helps us to understand a little bit more about cued speech. Next, Sharon Bryant has a question. And then after that, Tracy has a question as well. Hello, Sharon. Hi. I forget, you have one deaf son, is that correct? And another one that's hearing? No, I have two hearing children. They're CODAs. Oh, okay, okay. Well, then that was a question. Now I don't have a question then. Never mind. Wonderful presentation. Thank you. Thank you. Tracy has a question. Dr. C has done a lot of development in terms of reading and cued speech, and it's been proven that cued speech is a great tool of support for deaf and hard of hearing students to learn how to read printed text. So in your research or in your personal experience, cued speech has helped a lot with reading skills. Is that correct? Okay, there's two things. First of all, within my personal experience in cued speech, I think that was later on. I think when I was about 8 or 9 years old. Prior to that, it was completely oral and learning how to speak, and I struggled. I didn't have complete access and had a hard time just getting by. So that's one thing. The second thing is, within the research, my research that's related to cued speech and studying deaf adults who grew up using cued speech, I wanted to see what their phonological representation looked like in a new situation. For example, I would ask a deaf person who uses cued speech if they have the correct representation without the use of sound. So I would ask something like the word WUG. So that's a makeup word. There's no such thing as WUG. I've never heard this word. Well, suppose I had two of them, WUGS. Maybe I should put an S on it. But in speech, we'd have to say it would be a Z sound, WGZ, WUGS. But in cued speech, that would show that, the S sound. This is the S sound, the three fingers, or an H. So what that means is trying to incorporate the phonological rules of English. The English phonological rules, it says the last one with a G, S should sound like a Z. So it should be a WGZ sound. In cued speech, you don't have to follow that. You could just, I wanted to see if WGZ was there or if it's just with S. And so in research, I found that they changed it to Z over and over and over because of the rules, because they'd seen that growing up from their parents and incorporated that into their memory. So they knew when they saw a G, it automatically became a Z instead of an S. And so that was interesting. So the question is, does that help with reading? It's hard to measure in terms of studying the children. But if you have full access to the phonological information, the logical principle it would be easier. Oh, for example, this here means the K sound, using the H hand shape. How's that connected with the letter C? for cat or the letter K, that you use that, the H hand shape to indicate that in cued speech. And so they could see their parents modeling that. It'd be like cat, oh, the letter C is a k sound, and you know cat, and they could connect that with the sound. Perfect. So I hope that answers Tracy's question. So some, variety of questions. Switch interpreters, please. Just a second.
I know it's a bit of a heavy conversation. No, absolutely. It's great information. Thank you. Are there any other comments or chats that like to be made? Anything in relation to what Daniel's life experience as a deaf person or using cued speech as a deaf person growing up? Anything regarding research or maybe even something about his experience transitioning from an oral approach to a sign approach later on? Anything like that? I have a question. I was wondering, you appear to be fluent in English, ASL, and I'm wondering if you still use cued speech. Are you still using it now as an adult? Yes. With deaf people that are cuers as well, I would naturally just use cued speech. Sometimes I work with a cued speech interpreter, but they don't call them interpreters. They call them transliterators because they're not really interpreting language. They're translating it from one form to another, from spoken language to cued speech. But I will work on my cued speech skills with people who are working on their receptive cued speech skills. And so, yes, I do use it, but I would say maybe like 95, 97% of my time I use American Sign Language. Oh, interesting. Thank you for answering. That was just a personal inquiry, that's all. Abby has a question. The speech language pathologist, that's what she does for her profession. And she said, thank you so much for your information. It was really good. It was very helpful, and how to utilize the information that you shared. Thank you so much for that. Again, like I said before, there's an extensive amount of information in my slides. So I just wanted to open the floor for questions instead of proceeding with the PowerPoint. Yes, we have about 8 minutes left. So if you have any final burning questions or comments or anything that you would like to make good on this time, please feel free. Okay, well, if not, then we can go ahead and have everyone start your video and say goodbye. And oh, hold on, there's one more question. Tracy, that's a really good question. Daniel, do you support using ASL or cued speech or both? Yes, and yes. Definitely, I support both. I truly hate it when people say you have to choose one over the other. I think that's a mistake. It really depends on what your child needs. How are they going to access English? How, using sign language, using spoken language, using both? Yes, I really think that both are important. And that's important to be bilingual. It's truly a beneficial organization. Oh, Daniel is part of an organization he's about to share with you. The organization, it's a non-for-profit organization. It's called Q Sign. And that organization is for people who have a firm belief and support in ASL and English, and they use cued speech to marry the two. So Q Sign hosts workshops. They have Q camps where they can teach both American Sign Language and cued speech, both. And there may not be a lot of people, but there's a lot of information to share with everyone. There's a website there on the PowerPoint. So you can feel free to reach out. You can look at the information online if you'd like, and you can contact the people at the organization. Again, everyone, I will be sending this out in a PDF format so that everyone who showed up today will have access to that information. If you want any more information on cued speech or any bit of the content here today, you can contact Tracy Duncan. Okay, well, I guess I'm out of words. Okay, well, thank you so much, Daniel. Oh, and Christy, yes. Thank you for sharing that about your interesting life journey, she says. Thank you so much, Daniel. I really appreciate my parents. I need to say that too. As hearing people having a deaf child, they were overcome. They didn't know what to do and where to support me. And the Montgomery County Public School System gives support to many deaf children. They have a wonderful program, a mainstream program there that's outstanding. And there are many other deaf people that participate and are involved in what goes on there. And so it's truly beneficial, not only for language development, but also for the social emotional piece. So we can learn how to interact with one another, make friends, and maybe not to make friends with people, you know, all of those life skills. I learned to look up to people. I learned who not to look up to. You know, it's just all of those great social experiences. It was really phenomenal. And the quality of the education through the interpreting service was incredible. So I was lucky. And I was growing up in the 80s-ish. That's all I'll say. All right. Well, thank you so much. And if there isn't anything else to add, would you mind opening up your screens, everyone, starting your video so we can wrap up and say goodbye? Thank you so much for coming. We appreciate having you all here. Bye. Thank you. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. Hi. Have a great weekend, everyone. Thank you.